Today on AGetc, we have another new technology feature for you. Kyle Bauer is joined by Mary Soukup, Assistant Secretary of the Kansas Department of Agriculture. She talks to us about the Cattle Trace program and how it works. She also talks about why you should consider the technology and what benefits it can bring to the industry. So enjoy this extended series on technology on today's show. Closed captioning brought to you by Ag Promo Source. Together we grow. Learn more at agpromosource.com. This segment brought to you by Kansas Regenerative Medicine. Your stem cells, your health, your life.
And thank you guys for being here today. Again, I'm Mary Soukup, and I have the pleasure and honor of serving as the Assistant Secretary at the Kansas Department of Agriculture. And like Kyle said, I'm here to talk to you today about Cattle Trace, an initiative in Kansas to develop and test a disease traceability system for the state of Kansas and hopefully, potentially, for the entire nation. And I'm going to start off and I'm going to show my age a little bit. Mark Zuckerberg. Mark is the CEO of Facebook, and he once said there are many ways to do innovation. You can throw a lot of seeds out on the ground and not really care about which one goes where and just see what happens. At Facebook, that's not what they do. They go mission first, they figure out what's important, they focus there, and that's where they put their energy. And over the next few minutes as I talk about Cattle Trace, that's something that we have done. Cattle disease traceability is a topic that could be very, very huge. But if we're going to be successful in developing and testing a system to effectively improve our ability to trace cattle movement for disease purposes, we had to stay focused. Before I get into the pilot project, I want to lay a bit of a foundation. Why Kansas? In Kansas, there are 6.3 million head of cattle. Of those, about 2.5 million are in feedlots. Those animals with our current disease traceability system that we have in the United States are not required to have any sort of individual animal identification system. That's a huge gap in the state of Kansas. Another number that's really important to know is again, that 2.5 million. We import on any given year about 2.5 million cattle into the state of Kansas from other states that go to our feed yards throughout the state. We don't necessarily know where they come from, what they were commingled with, and who they met along the way today. We're trying to address that with Cattle Trace, and I'll get into that. A little bit more about the current disease traceability system in the United States. It's been in place since March of 2013, and we're required to have an official identification in all sexually intact beef cattle that are over 18 months of age, and we track interstate movement. So, two big gaps in our current rule. No cattle under 18 months of age, and only interstate movement. Cattle move a lot in the state of Kansas and in all states, and a lot of that movement goes from one operation in the state of Kansas to another, and right now we don't know exactly when that happens. Again, traceability is not a new topic. It's not a new concept, but when we look at those calves that aren't required to be tagged right now and be applied to the traceability system or to the animal disease traceability program, folks have been talking over the last few years. There's been some momentum, and I want to highlight a couple of those initiatives that really pushed us to get Cattle Trace started. Number one, a few years ago, the Kansas Department of Agriculture went to work with our partners across the state and developed strategic growth plans for individual sectors. In the beef industry, the number one priority from cow-calf producers to feedlot operators to packers and livestock markets was traceability. And the sentiment was either, yes, we need it for disease traceability, absolutely, or yes, we need it because of the potential export access we can gather, or it's going to happen. We should take the lead in Kansas and figure out the system and figure out how to make it work for us and for our industry.
To see this show and past episodes of Ag AM in Kansas, go online to agamинkansas.com.
The new Better Horses Network is worldwide. Presented by Lucas Oil. Featuring worldwide radio and TV with iconic hosts like Al Dunning, Sharon Camarillo, Ernie Rodina, Lindy Birch, and Craig Cameron. With American Cowboy, Horse and Rider, Brushy Creek, Cavenders, and Ride TV. Worldwide radio and TV. The all-new Better Horses Network.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
This segment brought to you by Kansas Wheat. Learn more at rediscoverwheat.org.
First thing that happened was the growth strategy at the state. Number 2 happened last December. At the annual convention of the Kansas Livestock Association, they amended their policy. KLA has for a long time had policy on the books that supported a voluntary disease traceability system. In December, they added 4 words to their policy. 4 words: mandatory and for all cattle. So in KLA's policy, KLA is one of the largest cattle industry associations across the country. Their policy now supports a mandatory individual animal identification system across the nation for all cattle. The third thing that happened, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association commissioned a feasibility study to look at traceability across the nation. And from this feasibility study, there were 7 key takeaways, and those takeaways have been priorities as cattle trace has come together. Number 1, it has to be industry driven. Number 2, it needs to be managed by both private industry and government. Number 3, maintaining data privacy is paramount. If we can't do that, producers just really aren't interested, and they shouldn't be. Number 4, it needs to be equitable across all sectors. In the past, some of the hangups have been one segment of the industry saying, well, I have a huge investment but no takeaway and no gain at the end. But these guys down here at the other end of the chain, they're getting all of the benefit and they don't have any of the cost. So if it's going to be successful in long term, it needs to be equitable across all industries. It has to be compatible with current industry practices. We can't add a burden to producers at any segment in the industry. It needs to operate at the speed of commerce, and it has to be credible in both domestic and international markets. So with those 3 things that happened, we decided in the state of Kansas that this is the right time to move on developing an enhanced traceability system. And for the reasons that I talked about earlier, the size and scope of the industry, and the fact that in Kansas we have every segment of the industry. Kansas isn't the largest beef producing state in the country. There are states to the south of us and one to the north of us that have more cattle, but we have every segment. We have cow-calf ranches and stockers and backgrounders and feed yards and livestock markets and packers and processors. We can test a disease traceability system end to end in the state of Kansas that could be replicated on a national level. So it's the right time, it's the right place, and in the state of Kansas in January, the right people came together. We have a group, Cattle Trace is comprised of a group that includes the Kansas Livestock Association, the Kansas Department of Agriculture, Kansas State University, and individual producers. So now that we have established kind of the foundation, you know the background, where we're coming from, I want to talk to you a bit about what cattle trace is and how it's going to work. And as I said in the beginning, disease traceability is a really, really big topic. And much like Facebook, with their mission to focus on their priorities, we're doing the same thing. We have 3 key objectives with cattle trace. Number 1, we're going to develop a purpose-built infrastructure for disease traceability. Number 2, we're going to test it. And number 3, we're going to determine its value, both at the individual producer level and at the industry-wide level.
Sure Crop Fertilizers was started by my father, Don Sherman, and my mother, Shirley Sherman. family business that started in the 80s. We predominantly focus on plant nutrients and what we can do to give growers better responses with the fertilizer dollars that they do, and what we can do to make those things work better for the grower. We're based out of Seneca, Kansas. We work with growers in their soil analysis to figure out what they need, and then we can put those in a blend that gives them the best results, and so that we can deliver that direct to their farm so that they have those nutrients where they need them, when they need them, and so that they can apply them in a manner that's very efficient to them and works well in their planting systems and what they're doing. Sure Crop Fertilizers has been around for a long time. We always say we're big enough to take care of everything you need, but yet we're small enough to do it quickly. You can get a hold of us at 1-800-635-4743. Our website is surecropfertilizers.com, and you can always email me at Corey@surecropfertilizers.com, and with any questions you have, we're glad to answer it and work with you.
Hi, I'm Kim Mandarin with Hardy Insurance. I'm here to help you with all of your farm and ranch needs. When it comes to protecting your operation and your family, you need a name you can trust at a price you can afford. Call me today or visit hardyaviationins.com.
Brought to you by Sure Crop, liquid crop nutrition delivered right to your farm.
So what does it mean to develop the system? First, we looked at what's been done in the past. Cattle Trace is not about comparing this technology versus that technology, or this tag versus that tag. We decided that we think the future in our RFID tags is an ultra high frequency tag, and we decided to go with that technology. And specifically, there's only one tag that is officially approved by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and so that's the tag we went with for the pilot project. Now, when Cattle Trace is a disease traceability system in the commercial industry, we are hopeful that there are other tags and other manufacturers' tags that are in the system, and the technology is capable of reading that. But for the purpose of the pilot project, we have one tag. The next piece of developing the system are the readers and the infrastructure. Again, we're using an ultra high frequency tag, and a lot of folks are familiar with the old RFID button tags where you've got to pull the ear and get the wand up really close to the calf to read that number. This technology, an ultra high frequency technology, isn't a new technology. It's a little bit newer in the beef cattle industry, but here it's the best way I can describe it is we all know what the K tag is like on turnpikes in the state of Kansas. Similarly, this technology will allow you to put readers at different spots at the feed yards and at the livestock markets and at the packers, and you can read multiple animals at the same time, and when they're moving at their normal gait. We've seen calves going through an alleyway at a feedlot as they've gotten off a truck, and that reader system is capturing every one of those tags. The other type of reader is a handheld reader, and it looks like a radar gun that you would see a highway patrolman have on his car. And with this reader, you pull the button and just scan it out over the crowd. And if you all had those tags in your ears, I would pull the button once, go like that, and it would capture every one of you. And you could get up and move around, and it would do the same. And so the third piece of our technology and developing our technology was the database. And with our database, it's a privately held database, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But as I talked about it, this needs to be simple and can't be burdensome. And Cattle Trace is entirely focused on disease traceability. So we are actually only interested in the minimal data necessary for disease traceability purposes. That includes an individual animal identification number, a GPS location, and a date and time stamp. I don't care the birth date, the birth weight, how you vaccinated it, how you fed it. For disease traceability, we don't need that information. There are potential capabilities in the future that producer A might work with feed yard B and packer C to pull information through the supply chain, and that information we can use this infrastructure and pull that through. But for cattle trace and disease traceability, we don't need it. So our database will have 3 key data points in it: the individual animal ID, the date and time stamp, and a GPS location. And that's all. So where are we currently? Where does the project stand? We are in the process of recruitment. That is where we are heavy in right now. We started at the end of the supply chain with our packers, and I'm excited to say that we have all 3 major packers in the state of Kansas participating in the pilot program. So whether calves go to Cargill, Tyson, or National Beef, they will have reader systems at the trolley that will be the terminal read. And once those tags are read right there, they're officially retired in the system. We know that that animal is no longer in the supply chain. The middle steps, I would say, the feed yards and the livestock markets, we really recruited those at the same time. And we looked at where existing business relationships are. So we asked our feed yards, and there we have 13 who are participating. We simply said, where do you procure cattle? For those of you that buy cattle at livestock markets, where do you buy cattle?
Valley Vet Supply is devoted to providing information and professional quality products at reasonable prices.
Valley Vet Supply.
Next time you see a beautiful field of corn, reach out and thank the farmers who work tirelessly to raise corn for livestock feed, renewable fuels, and exports to feed a growing world population. The farmers on the Kansas Corn Commission work for Kansas Corn with grower-funded checkoff dollars that support foreign and domestic market development, research, promotion, and education to expand opportunities for Kansas farmers. To learn more, visit kscorn.com.
I dug trees by hand for years and years and years. In the process, I wore out my rotator cuff. But when I learned about this process, I thought if there's a way to get rid of this pain, then I wanted to do it. So we did it, and it worked. I'm not going to go out and dig trees with a shovel anymore, but I can do the things that I want to do now.
This segment brought to you by Kansas Corn. Learn more at kscorn.com.
And from there, we have narrowed it down, and we have our 13 feed yards, and we have 7 livestock markets in the state of Kansas. And now we're at the cow-calf level. And our focus with cow-calf is to, again, identify where existing business relationships are. And so our focus is on cow-calf producers in counties where our livestock markets are, or the counties that surround them. And our markets are farmers and ranchers in Salina, winter livestock in Pratt, winter livestock in Dodge City, in Mankato and Manhattan, and La Crosse and Russell. So those are our livestock markets. I've got it counted on my fingers or I'll forget one. So those are our 7 livestock markets, and that's really where our focus is with our cow-calf recruitment. For cow-calf producers, again, making sure we're equitable in all segments of the industry. We've made it a priority that all of our partners have a little bit of skin in the game and a little bit of an investment in the pilot program. So the packers and the feed yards, they're buying their own reader systems. That is their investment. They are investing in that technology and that infrastructure in their operation. At the cow-calf level, we're asking our producers to make a $1 per head, pay a $1 per head participation fee. The tags cost us about $2.20 to buy. The pilot project is subsidizing the cost of the tags for the pilot. So the cost for producers is it's a $1 per head participation fee. It's exciting. We officially, as of yesterday, have our first official cattle trace movement data in the database. Our first set of calves were sold through the Russell Livestock Market yesterday. But over the next 18 months or so, we will continue recruiting calves, recruiting producers, and monitoring that data. We anticipate there are a lot of tags that are going in right now, and we're going to see a lot of those calves sold this fall and this winter. The second objective, so that's what we're doing with development. The second objective is to test it. So you've got this infrastructure out there, you've got all these tags in the calves. Now, how are you going to prove that it really is effective for disease traceability? And so as we're gathering this data, we're going to do a series of mock tracebacks. And we're going to look at things like, are we collecting the right data? Are there pieces of information that we need? Do we have our readers at the right places at the markets and in the feed yards and at the packers? Do we need them someplace else? Is there a better place to put them? Is it improving our ability to trace cattle and identify either diseased or at-risk cattle in the supply chain? And finally, can it be replicated at a larger level and at a national level? So those are some of the key objectives. And then our third objective was to determine the value of the system. And the Kansas State University Department of Agricultural Economics is going to be running a series or doing a series of economic analysis and economic studies, helping us identify the value at the producer level and then at the full industry level.
Tarwater Farm and Home is a 40-year-old local family-owned business. Clothing for work and play, seeds and feeds, boots, toys for the kids, and tools you'll need for around the house and farm. And a service department to keep them in top running order. It's a big store, so take some time to see what they have for your farm and home. Tarwater's everyday pricing is like others' sale prices. When you need it, they've got it. Tarwater Farm and Home, 4107 North Topeka Boulevard.
KFRM is one of the largest farm radio stations in the nation, dedicated to informing and entertaining rural listeners from northern Oklahoma to southwestern Nebraska. You can catch KFRM in many ways, of course, 550 on the AM dial, streaming at kfrm.com, or on your smartphone by going to the TuneIn Radio app, or on Ag AM in Kansas on Tuesdays and Facebook every day of the week. KFRM, tune us in. You'll be glad you did.
This segment brought to you by Kansas Soybean Commission. Progress powered by Kansas farmers.
I'm going back to our friends in the technology sector, and there was a vice president at Google that said the Googly thing to do is to launch a product in the Google Labs, test it, fix it, make it great, and if we follow that method, we're not getting too far from what the market wants. The market always pulls us back. And similarly with cattle trace, we are listening to our partners in the marketplace every step of the way. And we've already had some key learnings. Number one, we have to stay focused. We have to stay focused on those three objectives. There are an infinite number of value-added propositions that could come with this type of traceability infrastructure. We're not focused on that. That is not the priority of cattle trace. Now, I mentioned an idea earlier that you can pull data through and add value at each step of the chain, or there are definitely export opportunities that could come with an enhanced traceability system in the United States. We are not focused on that, and we are staying 100% focused on our three core objectives. And in fact, we've said if we add something else to the pilot project, we've got to take something else away, and that's been a really good gut check to make sure we're staying focused. The second thing that we have learned is that industry involvement is key. There have been attempts at disease traceability in the past, and they have failed miserably because it has come from government and it's been top down, and there was no producer involvement at all in the process. And the producer involvement, one of the key things that I wanted to talk about was data privacy. Cattle Trace Inc. is a third party, is officially now a third party, not-for-profit entity. And they own, and Cattle Trace Inc. owns the database. We named a board of directors, and that board of directors includes 2 feed yards, 2 calf operators, and 1 sale barn. And they're the board of directors. So that is the group that will set policy decisions in the future. They'll tell government when you can get into the database, what data you can have, and how you're going to access it. That's not going to be the Kansas Department of Agriculture. We will not, and we should not, have unfettered access to that data. That will be there will be contentious discussions about that, but that is something that my boss at the Kansas Department of Agriculture feels very passionate about. And so again, it's a privately owned database, and we've had industry involvement along the way. The third thing that we have learned is there is a great deal of education that needs to happen as we move forward. There are folks that still have bad feelings about traceability from attempts a decade ago. There are folks that have questions about the value add propositions. There are folks that have questions about costs at the producer level, and those are all answers that we are working to address and working to answer, and we're going to continue doing that. We've got folks on the road all the time talking about cattle trace and doing producer education meetings, and I'm thrilled to be here today to be able to talk with you all about cattle trace a little bit more. The fourth thing we've learned is there are still significant technological needs. Our partners with cattle trace have been fantastic, our technology partners, but the fact of the matter is if cattle trace is going to be a national scope project or program, There simply needs to be more technology providers in the marketplace for that to be feasible. And finally, the thing we've learned and been so surprised about is the amount of interest we've had from across the country. We've had calls from state departments of agriculture in Oklahoma and Missouri and Alabama, and we've had producers call from states all over the country saying, I've heard about this cattle trace thing. How can I get involved?
Closed captioning brought to you by Ag Promo Source. Together we grow. Learn more at agpromosource.com. Watch Ag AM in Kansas online at agaminkansas.com.